Hi, everyone. Nice. I see many of you joining the room. That is great. Um, I'm going to give it like a few seconds for everyone to join, make sure that everyone is online before actually starting. So take your time. Wow. Yeah, I see that we have some people in the room. Hi, Nakishukas. Sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, but welcome. Um, well, Since I'm at it, welcome everyone to this webinar. It is very great to see you all here. Well, actually, I cannot see anyone because of this webinar platform, but it would be really nice if you could write your names and tell us a bit um, what you studied, what you study now or have studied, or if you're working. Yeah, so type that in the chat, your name and your studies. Yeah, so I can at least know that I'm talking to real people, not just to a screen. I see Haddon. Hello. It is very nice that everyone has joined us. Um, well, um, yeah, Madeline, thank you for joining us. Nice. Well, it's great to have some people here. Um, Caroline, yay, nice, you could join us. Okay, so my name is Monica. Um, I am both a member of the Future for Nature Academy and part of the Wageningen Student Challenges team. And for this webinar, we are taking a look at how living together with wildlife can be improved. Hi, Elvis. Elvis, sorry if I mispronounce names. This is very common. Hi. Wow, nice. So many people. Um, Okay, but yeah, for this webinar, we are looking at how life with wildlife can be improved, and maybe you have experienced some troublesome encounters with wildlife where you live. Think about ants or maybe birds eat your trash. um, but well, for some of us, living with wildlife is a tad bit challenging, can be truly challenging. And well, we are here today to show that sometimes nature itself provides the solution. So yeah, we will share with you some examples on how nature-based solutions can help create these win-win scenarios. Well, this is a perfect opportunity to get some inspiration if you are looking to participate in Wageningen's upcoming nature-based solution challenges, or if you just want to learn more about how the field is progressing. And I guess to deliver this inspiration to you, we have someone who is very familiar with that word, inspiration. Um, and besides being assistant professor at Wageningen University, our speaker of today, who some of you know very well, Ignas Heitkönig, is also the co-founder of the Future for Nature Academy, which is a co-host today together with the Wageningen University. And in Ignas in 2016, together with Haasje Nuiten, decided to bring award-winning conservationists straight into classrooms and university halls to share their stories and inspire the next generations of conservationists. And hence, the Future for Nature Academy was born. And fast forward a few years, we've grew to become a very wide international or Dutch organization, or a nationwide network of students and young professionals. That's what I wanted to say. And if you happen to see the name of your city on the screen right now, well, lucky for you. That means the Academy is active in your city. And if you want to join as a member or just want to find out more, you can reach out to us, of course. Throughout the year, we organize multiple events like lectures, workshops, even excursions and cleanups, for instance. But once every year, we organize the Future for Nature Academy Day, where we again invite award-winning conservationists to share their stories with you, just as it started. Well, I think some of you are here because you already know the Future for Nature Academy. Some of you are here because you're interested in the nature-based solutions challenges. So I would ask you to tell us which one. We'll be launching a poll. If you can launch the poll, David, yes, nice. Oh, I see it's already ready. Well, yeah, I see a lot of you are joining from the WUR Student Challenges side. Well, thank you for joining us. Some of you from the Future for Nature Academy, that's awesome. Some of you even from other youth organization or from Wageningen, that's perfect. So we're gonna let that run for a little bit. Yeah. So I see a lot of you already know FFNA, but well, together with other youth organizations, Future Nature Academy is a partner in the upcoming Nature-Based Solutions Challenge, organized by Wageningen University. And if in any case you are considering to join this challenge, my colleague David, who has been behind the scenes on this challenge, is here to go over some practicalities of joining the challenge with you. So David, yeah, if you want to take over.
Yes, thank you, Monica, for introducing me, the challenge, Ignas, and this exciting webinar. Really great. Well, some of you have joined the kickoff event, so they are already aware of what's going on with the Nature-Based Solutions Challenge by WUR. I will quickly go through what this challenge is and some details of the challenge before we go to the main speaker of the event to inspire you to participate in the challenge or to further work with nature-based solutions at any other chance you're given. Well, in the Nature-Based Solutions Challenge by WUR, you're meant to implement a nature-based solutions project at your chosen site. And the nature-based solution, it should address a problem that you are working on. And besides solving the problem, it should contribute to the climate, to biodiversity and society. And in the webinar series that we are organizing with Future for Nature Academy, but also others, we give you the inspiration and to make some nice project plans for this really exciting challenge. How to participate? Well, you can participate with teams from 2 to 5 students. And the 8 to 10 teams that are selected, they receive funding, 2,500 euros, plus mentoring from experts. For instance, from Witteveen and Bos and Arcadis, which are two very well-known firms in the sector of nature-based solutions, to really make your nature-based solutions project into a success. Well, you have quite some time till the 13th of April to submit your concept note for this challenge. And in the concept note, you basically explain what you are really going to do in the challenge. So what will your nature-based solutions project be like? What's your problem definition? What's the vision of the project site you're working on? Of course, also includes how you want to spend the budget, the timeline of your project. And it would be nice to add a team picture to see you also in the concept note. And a few more details, well, details, not really details, but criteria on which the experts will judge the proposed projects. That is the impact of your nature-based solutions on adaptation, mitigation, biodiversity, human well-being, economy, and potentially other aspects that you can define yourself in the concept notes. feasibility of your project. So that's more like the process and the planning, the timeline, the problem definition, how feasible is your project. Scalability is the potential to use your ideas also at other slightly different situations and locations, is the potential to scale it up in later phases. And last criteria is whether it's in line with the guiding principles on nature-based solutions. And on our website, there is a link to the article which explains these 4 guiding principles. The time path, well, we had a kickoff 2 weeks ago. Some of you attended it, but you can watch it back. Currently, we are in the webinars phase. Currently, it's the 1st of March, and you are attending a webinar in part of the webinar series. Then there is some time to submit a concept note. And at the 10th of May, there will be a final selection of the teams that are participating in the challenge. From that moment on until October, you have time to really work on your nature-based solutions project. And in October, there will be the finals of all the teams that participated. And we are working towards the COP27 in Egypt, and we aim to give the winners of this nature-based solutions challenge the opportunity to present their work there. That's really a short summary on the nature-based solutions challenge. There can be a lot found on our website. And after the presentation by Ignas, there's also time to ask some questions on this challenge. So I would like to give the floor to Monica back, so she can, take over now. Thank you all. And I look really forward to this webinar and also to seeing all your concept notes soon. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, David. Well, I hope you are now excited to hear about all that Ignas has to say about nature-based solutions and how they can help us cope or coexist with wildlife. That's a cute elephant, by the way. So, Ignas, if you are ready to take the floor now from me, please. Yes, hi. Nice to see you.
Hi, Monica. Thank you for inviting me to be here.
Of course. Well, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to tell you how to create nature-based solutions. I'm going to give a presentation about what I came across when I did some research on nature-based solutions. And I'm going to take you through my slides. If you have things to add to the chat, please go ahead. If you have questions to ask, you can post them in the chat. I will not read the chat while presenting, but afterwards, David and Monica can get questions from the chat and post them to me, or do it in another way, more direct communication. That's also fine. So this is an elephant crossing a fence. My name is Ignas, and I work at the Wildlife Ecology and Conservation Group at Wageningen University. And as Monica explained, I'm also a co-founder of the Future for Nature Academy. And Future for Nature is an organization dishing out awards to brilliant people who do fantastic conservation work and who serve as examples for all of us around the world. So let me first take you to the situation on the terrestrial world. Maybe you've seen this graph before. It's about the distribution of the Earth's land mammals, so all the mammals on the terrestrial part of the world. And as we can see in this figure, there is a huge amount of cattle. There are a lot of human beings, and there is much more livestock. In fact, 97% of all the global biomass on terrestrial Earth is compiled of human beings and their livestock. So effectively, only 3% is wild, which means that from what happened to be wild 100%, about 5,000 years ago, it's now wild less than 3% this day and age. So that gives an indication of how much the pressure is on natural areas, and also how extensive the human-wildlife conflict is. And the human-wildlife conflict is at the center of this presentation, together with ways of trying to reduce that conflict over wildlife. It's been defined by people like Alexandra Zimmerman as conflicts that are typically underpinned by disagreements between people. And they emerge when the behavior and the needs of wildlife are at odds, are against human goals or ideals, which then lead to negative impacts on conservation and on other human interests. So human-wildlife conflict is really about people being in conflict with nature, you can say, but also people being in conflict with other people. And it's about parties, it's about stakeholders negotiating access to resources, discussing their values, having relationships with resources and one another. It's about economics, politics, and territory interests. So one of the papers I was looking at in the preparation for this talk, one of the papers that's mentioned on the right-hand side in this slide looked at the, let's say, the conflict, or not the conflict, about how the papers actually developed over time that dealt with human-wildlife conflict. So they counted for each and every year since 1997 individual papers that were listed by Google Scholar, and for each year they listed how many papers were actually counted. And they did that for human-wildlife conflict, and as you can see, up to 2016, when they stopped counting, there is almost like an exponential increase in the number of papers on human-wildlife conflict. Also, fortunately, there is some sort of an increase on papers on human-wildlife coexistence. And I thought, in preparation of this talk, I'm going to see how that increased over the past couple of years. And indeed, in both cases, the number of papers published per year on each of these topics is still growing exponentially. But then the talk of my presentation included nature-based solutions. So my next thing to add in Google Scholar was nature-based solutions, right? So how did that develop over time? How many publications came out in each and every year since 1997? Well, if you look at that, then it really goes off the scale. In fact, last year alone, there were 7,130 publications on nature-based solutions, which means that almost all problems are solved, right? Such a large number of publications suggests that a lot of people are working on it and are trying to find solutions to problems, solutions in nature that can help us solve problems. So that gave me a lot of hope. Next thing I did was I combined the keywords nature-based solution or nature-based solutions with human-wildlife conflict. And both of them, in the meantime, had received, well over 15,000 publications if you add them cumulatively in Google Scholar. And I thought that's going to yield me a fantastic sort of set of papers from the Web of Science. I used Web of Science for finding scientific publications on these issues. But actually, there were 0 publications that combined the two terms, nature-based solutions and human-wildlife conflicts. None at all, to my surprise. So then I tried whether there was perhaps a combination to be made of nature-based solutions and human-wildlife coexistence. But again, Web of Science found no results whatsoever. Which means that there is probably a huge knowledge gap, or perhaps even completely uncharted territory for combining these two things, for finding nature-based solutions to achieve less human-wildlife conflict, which means that there is a huge opportunity for you to work on this as student teams, I would say. Spoiler, if you use Google Scholar for this exercise, you do come up with several papers that actually find a sort of common place between all of those terms. Effectively, as I said in the beginning, human-wildlife conflict is a global conservation issue, priority perhaps even. It's global, it's a conservation priority issue because everywhere in the world there is this fragmentation of nature, fragmentation of forests, an increase in arable lands. We know all the conflicts that occur everywhere, also about mining resources. The Ukraine conflict is largely about the mineral resources that are available in that part of the world. Human-wildlife conflict is also something that can arise out of conservation successes. For instance, in India, or in this case in Nepal, actually, we see that the tiger protection has improved over the past several years, a decade or so, decade and a half. And that means that the number of tigers is actually increasing. And with the numbers of tigers increasing, they are posing a larger problem for the local population. For instance, in the case of Bardia National Park in Nepal. So human-wildlife conflicts may actually arise even as a function of conservation success. In all cases, human-wildlife conflicts are very complex, whether it's the case in the Netherlands, when we talk about sort of renewed importation of predators like the wolves, or whether it's the case elsewhere in the world, it's always a very complex situation. It's about emotions, it's about damage, it's about fear, it's about power, culture, and economics, about money lost. It's about security and beliefs. Anything goes into this equation of human-wildlife complexes. So the main issue here is to be aware that it is very complex and do not shy away from figuring out how complex it actually is. Bring that into a map. Some people are capable, like in India, are capable of working very well with a livestock together with wildlife, in this case predators, who also prey on their livestock, but they seem to tolerate that to a large extent. So the tolerance levels may be large in some communities and low in other communities, and that's part of the complexity of the situation. Effectively, then, looking at human-wildlife conflicts is not a matter of doing it from an ecological point of view, the left silo, or purely from a social, psychological point of view, or from behavioral ecology, or from whatever. Each of these silos is relevant, but none of them should actually exist in total isolation. Working on this issue means looking at it from different disciplines. So the second lesson, apart from the fact that there is still a lot of uncharted territory here, is think of your team as of students coming from different disciplines. Don't shy away from inviting students that you know from a completely different branch of science and you are interested in, that you are studying yourself. Right, so much for a broad introduction. Let's first have a look at a couple of nature-inspired examples. So examples that could perhaps inspire a reduction of human-wildlife conflicts. And I'm doing this very broadly, taking a couple of examples. One of them is about the bear dogs. And the bear dog is a picture on the left, a picture on the right, and the bear is in the middle. And this is really about Karelian dogs. Karelia is a part of the world on the southeast part of Finland and the northwest part of Russia, where these dogs are originating or bred. And these Karelian bear dogs can actually be trained to bark at bears. This is an issue in the United States where bears come very close to human settlements and they may be even a nuisance to people. But these dogs can be trained to bark at the bears. And when they are employed to bark at bears, what then happens is that the bears are scared off, and really scared off far and fast, without getting injured, without getting bitten. So the only thing that the dogs do is bark at the bears. And this is one way of where you use part of nature, let's say the dog, and use that part of nature to prevent or reduce the human-wildlife conflicts that the bears can actually impose here. Another example, completely different example, is again focusing on dogs. An example provided by IFAW, the International Fund for Animal Welfare. And what IFAW has done is, in different places in the world, it is dealing with the human predator conflict or the human wildlife conflict, in this case with jaguars in Mexico. And the jaguars are animals that tend to encroach onto villages. We could also say that the villagers are actually encroaching onto jaguar habitat. And that often leads to jaguars attacking livestock, and particularly dogs. So dogs that people have as guardian dogs and as companion animals, they're often attacked by jaguars. And one way in which this conflict can be reduced is by creating houses for dogs, like small dog sheds, if you like, that are, in this particular case, painted blue by the organization called IFOL, by enticing people to join into this exercise, painting blue houses for dogs, so that the dogs are focused upon and more protected from jaguars. And the exercise here is a community exercise where many different processes take place, so that eventually the dogs are actually better guarded in these communities, and the conflicts with the jaguars is reduced tremendously. The third example I want to provide to you is an example about masks. Some Indians or some Bangladeshi people, they actually wear masks behind their heads. And this has been occurring since the late 1980s in parts of the country. And the question is, why do they do that? And the reason for that can be found in nature. What we see on the left-hand side is a butterfly, on the right-hand side is a beetle. And what they have in common are these big eyes to scare off predators, right? And scaring off predators is something that helps in reducing the predator attack on these animals. So they get less attacked and they have a higher chance of survival, a greater fitness. This is not a great example of where a caterpillar sort of dresses up, if you like, in the colors of an animal with a mouth, a snake, and big eyes, again to reduce the attacks on the animal itself. There was a student in the 1980s who was part of an organization, a student organization, a student science organization in Kolkata, and he came up with a brilliant idea. The sad thing is that no one can actually retrace who that student was, whether it was a he or a she, whether he or she had a name. We have no clue at all. The story doesn't mention that whatsoever, which is very sad, which is one of the reasons why you, when you come up with your nature-based solutions for whatever topic, make sure that your names are in full, that you are traceable, and that your road to fame does not get lost by the fact that we don't know anymore who you were. So what the student thought is that, predators, especially tigers, they tend to attack their prey from the back. So whether they attack sheep or whether they attack cattle, what they do is that they tend to attack from the side or from the back. This is not always the case, but many tigers actually do, by and large. So what happened then is that the student decided to try this out and to equip some people with masks. And this was taken up by the forestry department in India, and they created a lot of these masks with people, with faces, with a certain shape that was thought to work pretty well. And people going into the forest, like the Sundarbans, this huge mangrove area in the south of Bangladesh, and partly also in India. The Sundarbans houses a lot of tigers, and it's their territory, it's their home. But people go in there to fish and to collect honey. And by wearing these masks on the side, on the back of their heads, they actually reduce the number of tiger attacks quite dramatically. So reportedly, there was no attack on a masked individual by a tiger over a period of 3 years in which masked individuals were followed, against, prior to that, about 1.6 attacks on a human being per month when that human being did not wear masks. So this is a sort of effect that a mask can have on people and in reducing the tiger attacks on people, in reducing human-wildlife conflict. Now, this is it's an interesting example. Sadly, it's not published. It's also not entirely nature-based. It's more like human-based, but still the inspiration is clear, and the message from this particular exercise is also quite clear. So those were nature-inspired examples. Is there also perhaps, are there nature-based examples to reduce the human-wildlife conflict? And in the preparation of this talk, I have been using, and I keep on repeating, one example that is absolutely fantastic. It's fabulous. This is Dr. Lucy King. Dr. Lucy King was the recipient of a Future for Nature Award in 2013. And she worked in Kenya at the time, and she was studying elephants. And Lucy somehow, at some moment in time, she realized that elephants and bees, especially the African bees, they did not like one another. Especially the elephants were afraid of the bees. And her mind started spinning and spinning and spinning. She discussed this with people, with farmers, and with fellow researchers. And she entered into a whole new era of science, if you like, in a way. What happened is that she created this idea of having bees as natural deterrent against elephants and placing them around arable fields where farmers are using crops. And this particular idea was then taken up in subsequent years by different people around the world, for instance, by Antoinette van der Water, who founded the organization Bring the Elephant Home. And she focused on bee protection of crop fields by farmers in Thailand. And in Thailand, the human-wildlife conflict is even a lot worse than it is in Kenya, as far as you can think in terms of good and bad, or worse or less worse. So this example, that was developed by Lucy King, and for which she gained the Future for Nature Award in 2013, has become an example for a global protection of arable lands wherever bees are available. So what happens is that the elephants are afraid of bees when bees, especially some kind of honeybees, are making noises, and they tend to go into the trunk of these elephants. And entering the trunk of the elephants creates an incredible pain in the elephants, especially if more bees do that. And bees tend to attract bees. They tend to come in hordes. So the elephants are really scared away from that. Already the sound of bees scares them away. So that gave her the idea of creating fences around arable fields where you have these beehives. And these beehives are then linked to wires. And if an elephant comes across that wire, it tends to trigger the bees to come outside of the hives and then attack the elephant. That's effectively what it tries to do. So in this project to come up with a solution to the farmers losing crops to elephants, yet at the same time also trying to come up with a nature-based idea of protecting the farms from elephants. She used bees as guardians, if you like, in this structure. This means that you have to work with communities at several fronts. First of all, explain the idea. Secondly, get people enthusiastic about it. Thirdly, make sure that you get the materials, that you get funds, that you get people trained. This is a whole big thing. It's not something that you read about in the papers. She published about it, fortunately. But it's something that you have to implement and those are big steps. It's a complex procedure. So it's about people getting together to create these beehives in the right bottom part, put them up in the field, at the right top part of this picture, and carrying them into the field on the left-hand side, and in the bottom left-hand side also at times harvesting honey, harvesting beeswax, and selling that for a profit. So it's not just a deterrent against elephants, it's also a means of creating additional resources by selling the products that you get from these beehives. And obviously it's important to create funding for this thing, at least initially. You don't sort of get money flowing in by itself. Getting funded for a conservation project is one of the main challenges. It's an art in itself, but it's absolutely necessary to spend a lot of time figuring out how you get money. Become a professional beggar, if you like. So, going a little bit back to the science behind it, human-wildlife conflicts and reducing human-wildlife conflicts, it's a matter of creating substance. So what is it that you want to create, right? Which processes need to be put in place in order to create that substance? And then through which relationships do you do that? All of these things in these three elements of negotiation theory are important for achieving that particular purpose. Or, as Alexandra Zimmerman puts it, the most important thing in creating a solution to a problem, for instance, a nature-based solution to reducing human-wildlife conflicts, is to start at the end, to start on the right-hand side. What is it that you want to have changed? What conflict do you want to see reduced? Try and be very, very explicit about that. And then think about the box to the left, that is an outcome. So what are the things that needs to happen in order to create that change? And once you've created the outcome, one box more to the left, what are the steps towards those things that needs to happen to create a change, the big impact that you want to see in the very end? So it's about planning backwards, creating a log frame for your project that starts at the ultimate goal and then plans its way backward towards the very beginning, all the different steps. This is part of theory of change, so not just negotiation theory, but also theory of change. And unfortunately, the theory of change is still poorly developed within the field of human-wildlife conflicts. And for students from universities taking part in this challenge, it could be a very interesting component to include in your projects. Listen to and read about the theory of change. Okay, I'm nearing the end of my presentation. I was thinking, why would we actually use nature-based solutions to reduce human-wildlife conflict? Why don't we just put up fences? The reason is that fences get trampled upon, or if there are electric fences, they need to be maintained. Technical solutions are fine, but they are quite limited in the scope that they have. On the other hand, there is no silver bullet for all our problems because of the fact that all of these conflicts are complex, they are dynamic, they may change over time, stakeholders may change over time. But effectively, the challenge that we pose here for you is to use the potential of nature to benefit nature as well as people that are affected by conflicts. So I think we need to refocus on what nature has to offer. Like in the case of bees and elephants, it's a nature-nature relationship, right? There are ecological processes at stake that influence the behavior of animals, that influence the behavior of humans. So try to think of what nature has to offer. Try to think of wild perspectives, really. Co-create these wild perspectives. Apply ecological principles. Think about adaptation and flexibility. If you make it local based, your nature-based solution, local or regionally based, make sure that you identify and honor cultural identities. Work with the social processes, identify and work with them to reach that cohesion and appreciation that is the cement among the building blocks of this nature-based solution. I know that the challenge asks to be upscaled, to see whether it's possible to upscale the processes that you have identified that you will work on in your projects. But be aware that there are often no blueprints, especially if the conflicts are context dependent. Then there are no blueprints, at least no automatic blueprints, to be created. So your case that you're creating with your student team may work very well in the one location, but perhaps not necessarily in another location. Try to indicate that as well. give you ideas about that. And lastly, I think that one of the most powerful things about nature-based solutions is that you decrease the dependence on technical ownership and on some sort of Western company becoming very rich from whatever is happening locally. 2 or 3 references. One of them is the Perspectives on Human-Wildlife Coexistence, a briefing paper by the IUCN that can be helpful in creating your challenge. And another one is on human-wildlife interactions. It's a book that I consulted with very many interesting perspectives. Lastly, I want to thank Antoinette van der Water from Bring the Elephant Home. I want to thank Veronica Straas for her interesting discussions we had a couple of days ago about this particular seminar. And I want to thank the Nature-Based Solutions Student Challenge team who has been facilitating this phenomenally, I would say. Thank you. Can I give the word back to you, David?
Yes, and Monica will also be on the screen in a second. Yes, there she is.
Hey. Well, thank you so much, Ignas. And well, it was really inspiring talk. And sorry, I am in a dark room right now because all the lights stop because of the motion sense. But well, anyhow, yeah, thank you for your great presentation. I would now like to invite everyone in the chat, if they have questions, to put them in the chat and see so we can pass them on to Ignas and he can answer them. I see that we have already one question. So from Amy Fitzmaurice, she would like to know how, or is interested to know how effective these interventions are, if there's evidence to provide they work, because many human-wildlife conflict interventions are not scientifically evaluated, but still being used. Do you have any insight on that, Ignas? Oh, you're muted. We don't hear you right now.
Thank you. Very good question. I was actually surprised that there was so little literature on it. Part of the reason is that that we are still at the, probably from a scientific point of view, at the starting phase of figuring out how to do that best. There are people working on this particular issue, on creating evidence-based improvements for a reduction of human-wildlife conflicts, or, to a large extent also for a restoration of forests and for improving agricultural productions, for instance, in Madagascar. And one of the people where we can perhaps look for some inspiration is Julia Jones. Julia Jones works in Wales, and she is someone who has fantastic, beautiful ideas about how to set up multidisciplinary research, how to engage local communities, how to monitor that, how to obtain data, analyze them properly, and publish on them. So she could be a very good example of how to do that if you look at nature-based solutions in agricultural and forestry context. But I think that she's one of the few examples, but also one of the few lonely examples doing that really. Another one is E.J. Milner-Gulland from Oxford University. She's also trying to achieve just that, the great pals in this field. Wild Crew in Oxford is also an organization trying to improve on all of these things. So taking all the difficulties into consideration.
Ignas, it might be nice to know that people from Wild Crew are actually attending this webinar.
Oh, right. So they can say much more about it than I can. Chip in, guys, if you want to. In fact, currently the director of Wild Crew is Amy Dickman, and she's worked on hunting issues in Africa a lot, and well, not just on hunting, but on predation ecology of large predators like lions. And she became more or less involved in hunting issues. Hunters are paying for their hunts, and part of the proceeds go towards local communities. Many people are strongly opposed to this. Many ecologists are, many wildlife lovers are strongly opposed to hunting. But she has, and Wild Crew has developed very good arguments as to, to think twice about forbidding hunting and forbidding the import of hunted products, for instance. Anyway, what I want to say about this is that it's such a complex and multidisciplinary issue that the number of publications on it is still quite low. Cambridge is looking at conservation, at evidence-based conservation, and they are, for many species and for systems in the world, they are looking at what evidence is there that it could work, that we can perhaps learn from the one project and apply that to another project in a modified form, perhaps. This really is a challenge, to create, let's say, a fundamental base of theory from which we can then abstract questions and projects that will work, sort of science-based. It remains a big issue for the time to come. And anyone who has ideas about it, please contact me. I'm happy to learn from you. I don't have wisdom to share with you, apart from what I just said. Monica, you need to...
Sorry, that's my turn. Yeah, now we have a question about the challenge for David, perhaps. How can we connect with other students to make a team for the challenge?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Well, of course, you can just address students in your own network or put a post on LinkedIn or ask in your chat group. But we also facilitate that a little bit from our side. Tomorrow at some point in the day, you will receive an email from me with the recording from this webinar, but also with a link to a registration form where you can fill out your name, what you're studying, and also you can provide some initial ideas on your project. And the result, that's the first link you get, and you also get a link with the results from that survey, and that's automatically updated. So you might contact other people who are also looking for other people in the challenge. So that's well, a great way to find other people, I would say. And as Ignas said, I really agree. Like making an interdisciplinary team is really valuable in this challenge. And Monica, if you agree, then I could maybe say some final words on the Nature-Based Solutions Challenge.
Yeah, there is also one more question. I think maybe either of you can answer, but Clara also asks if WUR is carrying any studies related to human-wildlife conflict.
That's a question for Ignas. I think.
Actually, yes, we do. We have studies on, we're starting a study in South Africa on human-baboon conflicts, where we also take a fairly strong approach from the social sciences together with ecology in an experimental setting. So we try to select a couple of villages where we carry out an experiment with people, a social science experiment, if you like, communities, citizen science study as well. And so we have both the ecological approach there, working with baboon behavior, trying to understand that, what do they raid at people's homes and gardens and why, and also see whether it's possible to increase the tolerance and reactions to baboons from people if they follow a sort of the theory of negotiation from that we want to apply in different villages. This is a proposal still in development. We have carried out and are still carrying out some studies on human-wildlife conflict in Indonesia, linked to a PhD work carried out there. There is a study currently going on in Botswana with a PhD student involving a component on trying to reduce that conflict using guardian dogs. In this case, to reduce the number of cheetah kills on livestock. So yes, there are several examples. Yes, we are working on it, but it's very difficult to turn them into 6-month master projects. The topic is hugely interesting. It's a global interest, but turning that into bits and chunks of bits and pieces to have it sort of fit within a master project is quite a challenge. But I would love to work on this a bit more over the next couple of years, and other people too.
That sounds really, really exciting. We have yet another question. So Anouk mentions that the examples on human-wildlife conflicts are mostly outside of Europe. Do you have any examples of human-nature conflicts in Europe and nature-inspired solutions there?
Well, there is the case of the WUR, for instance, in the Netherlands. It's a new predator, or relatively new in the sense that it has re-entered the Netherlands and is now creating a conflict with mainly sheep farmers. One of our MSc students, under the guidance of Femke Broekhuis, actually did an MSc. She just completed an MSc study on this particular type of conflict, where she focused on mainly on the attitude and the tolerance of sheep farmers towards this conflict. What we tend to do in Europe is put fences in places. So we have fences that we put around fields, that we put around our pastures, about our surrounding the croplands, to physically create this separation between wildlife and agricultural production. We have not yet developed, as far as I know, for this kind of problem, a relationship with nature in which nature helps to change the behavior of the problem animal species and or the behavior of the human species, if you like. So there too, we're still searching, I guess, for proper solutions. And the challenge is for you to come up with ideas that could be mind-boggling, or could be a step towards a nature-based solution. That's also fine.
Yeah, that's great to know, Ignas. Well, this was our last question. I also want to add that, well, specifically for this example, I had the short opportunity of working with this issue in Greece. So trying to protect livestock from wolf predation, and there we were using these fences that simulated flames. So they're called flat leaf fences. This has also been used not only in Greece but in Poland, and as far as I know also in the United States. And these flags are meant to simulate, I think, fire. So the wolves are repelled by this. So we were doing research on that. If you want, I can share also some names for if you want to check out their research. But well, with that kind of wraps it up. So I hope you had a good time today, and I hope you were able to leave with more ideas and inspiration, and perhaps even more questions about human-wildlife coexistence, or even the nature-based solutions challenge. If you really want to participate or want to enter with a team and really need to know more information, you can always check out the website, the website that's you see now on the screen. And yeah, any further questions that you have specifically about the nature-based solutions challenge, you can contact David. Perhaps David, you can leave your contact out there. And yeah, I see that a lot of people added a lot of recommendations, a lot of papers, a lot of information on the chat. So we'll be trying to make that reach you after this is done. And you can always watch back the repetition of this webinar on our YouTube channel. It should be available from tomorrow on. And yes, the YouTube channel, by the way, is WUR Student Challenges. So yeah, so stay tuned. I hope you liked it, and yeah, we'll see you on the next one.
Okay, can I ask one more question,
For sure.
Monica? Yeah, I would love to see initiatives that do not come out of Europe. I would love to see initiatives that come from South America, from Asia, from Africa, where the European mind is just preferably not there. You know, try to be as close to nature as possible. We are lacking that sort of information. I would love to see it coming from student communities, from student teams, specifically from those continents that are not Europe-based.
Yeah, hopefully we really hope that students from the southern hemisphere are joining us for the nature-based solution challenges, because of course in Europe it's a different landscape, a different problem altogether, and I think people in the global south have more problems securing their livelihoods with and living together with these conflicts. So hopefully that's one of our goals for this challenge.
Thank you.
Well, if there are no further questions or anything, I would like to say goodbye now to you. Wish you a very, very great evening. And yeah, hope to see you in the next webinar. You can also go to the website on the screen and find other webinars coming up from our other youth organizations. So yeah, it was lovely to see you here. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you for joining. Thank
Thanks
you,
all for joining.
Ignas. Thank you,
Thank you,
David.
Ignas.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks all for joining.
Thank you.
Look forward to
Bye-bye.
seeing all the concept notes.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.